Hello and welcome to the Bibble IT training aids for the Microsoft Exam 7680 for Windows 7. This is Section 2, Module 1. The stuff we're going to be looking at in Section 2 is deploying Windows 7, and specifically in this module we're going to be having a look at how you can capture Windows 7 images. So just to have a quick recap about why we would want to use image-based deployments. You can imagine if you've got a bunch of computers, say 10 or more, and you're trying to configure them all identically. Well, it might work out that you do your first installation, then you come to your second one, your third one, your fourth one, and you do things ever so slightly differently. Even if you've got some sort of a tick sheet or some sort of a method for making sure you're doing everything the same, chances are that you're not going to be perfect, and a few things might end up differently. The advantage of using something like an image-based deployment is you take your reference computer and then you clone it. So you just roll it out once, twice, 3 times, as many times as you need, and each time it's going to be an identical copy of that original computer. So what we're actually going to be covering today is having a look at some of the tools we're going to use to help with our capture process. Then we're going to go through actually capturing a Windows 7 image by creating an unattended answer file, preparing our machine for capture, creating our capture environment, which is going to be based around the Windows PE framework that we talked about in Module 1, capturing an image, and then we're going to look at some of the options for mass image capture. So the tools we're going to be using are going to be mainly using the WAIK, Windows Automated Install Kit. The main tool inside this we're going to be using is Windows Sim. This lets you import your Windows image and then create answer files based on the selections inside the image. We're going to be using a tool called ImageX, which lets you capture and deploy WIM-based images. DISM, which stands for Deployment Image Servicing and Management. That's a tool that lets you modify your images after you've created them, so that if you want to add some new drivers, insert a patch, something like that, you don't have to deploy your image to a reference machine and then recapture it again. We're going to be having a look at some of the WinPE tools that allow you to create Windows PE boot CDs, and then lastly OS CD image. This is a tool that's used to convert your Windows PE flat folder structure into a bootable CD image. Another tool we're going to be using is SysPrep. SysPrep lets you prepare your reference computer before you take an image of it, so it lets you generalize your machine to remove all the unique identifying information from one computer so it can be deployed over and over again. And then lastly, we're going to talk about MDT, the Microsoft Deployment Toolkit, which allows you to do light touch deployments. So we're talking quite a lot about this thing called a WIM file. WIM stands for Windows Image. It's a file format that Microsoft introduced with Windows Vista. It allows you to take file-based images as opposed to disk-based images. A disk-based image would mean you'd start at sector 0 and work your way through right to the end of the disk, taking a record of everything that's in each sector on the disk. With a file-based image, you're not doing that. You're looking at all the files and folders that are on a disk, taking a copy of those, and then you can apply that folder structure and file structure back on a disk. One of the advantages of using WIM files is you can have multiple images per WIM, so that's why when you buy your Windows 7 disk down the shops and you get home and you decide you later want to upgrade from, say, Home Premium to Ultimate, it's actually got all the Ultimate files already on that WIM image. It does this using a process of deduplication. As you can imagine, each install of Windows 7, there's going to be an awful lot of files that are very, very similar or exactly the same across them. In a WIM file, they're only stored once, and then only the different files for each different image inside your WIM will need to be kept separately. So the process that we're going to use to capture our image, first thing we're going to do is create an auto-unattend.xml. Now this is actually optional. To create your reference machine, you could just put the CD in, go through the configuration manually and set it up how you want. If you use an unattend.xml file, that means that you're providing all the information that Windows Setup needs in a file, so that every time you come back, say you want to build a second reference computer for installing a different set of applications on it, this means that if you're using the same unattend file, that you're guaranteeing that the base operating system has been installed in exactly the same way with exactly the same settings. Next thing we're going to do is create ourselves a reference computer, then create a Windows PE boot disk, then we're going to boot up into Windows PE and capture the image to a network location. Okay, so first of all we need to install the WAIK. You can download that from Microsoft. The right term to search for is Windows Automated Install Kit AIK for Windows 7. There's different versions of this for older versions of the operating system. Make sure it's the one for Windows 7. Now you can install this on Server 2003, Vista 2008 or Windows 7 platforms. It doesn't matter what your technician computer is. In my case we're going to install it on a 2008 R2 machine. So here's our technician server or technician computer. It's got the WAIK CD in the drive, so we're just going to open that up, run start CD, and then this is our setup here. Now you can see we've got a whole bunch of information here. Things like links to the application compatibility toolkit, the Microsoft deployment toolkit that we were mentioning before. You can browse the DVD because there's a few tools and bits and pieces buried in the CD itself. This time we're just going to run the WAIK setup. The setup's fairly straightforward, so I won't sit through it. It's just next, next, next to the end. And that's setup completed there. So we'll just come out of this and have a look at what's actually been put on our computer. If we look in our start menu under WAIK, we've got a shortcut to jump straight to the deployment tools command prompt. That's because quite a few of these tools are actually command-based tools. And we've also got the option to start Windows SIM, System Image Manager. If we have a look in my computer under C, Program Files, WAIK, then in Tools, this is where most of the things you'll be using. So you can see here we've got things like USMT, which we talked about in the previous module. Under x86, we've got tools like ImageX, and we've also got some various WIM management tools in here as well. We've got under PE tools here, this is what we're going to be using later on to create our versions of PE. And in servicing, we've got DISM, which we talked about before. Right, so let's open up Windows SIM and work through the process of creating an unattend file. Okay, this is Windows SIM. Up here, this is where we'd be able to select a distribution share if we've got somewhere on our network with all sorts of versions of our images. Down here is our specific Windows image that we're working on, so at the moment we're just going to open this up. Now I've put the Windows 7 CD in the drive. So if we browse the CD and have a look in sources, we should see two different WIM files here. We've got boot.wim, which is the Windows PE environment that Windows 7 uses for setup, and then we've got install.wim, which is the actual installation file. So if we select install.wim, we should now have a choice of which version of Windows 7 we want to work with. This is what I was saying before, where inside that one WIM file are all the different images for these versions. We're just going to select Windows 7 Professional. And we should get down the left-hand side here a selection of all these different components, each of which allows us to customize varying bits and pieces for them. On the right-hand pane here in the answer file, this is the current answer file that we're working on. So we're just going to right-click, do New Answer File, and you can see relating to our components here, we've got a set of different options. Each of these options or sections represent a different time during the setup and installation process. So Windows PE, that's customizations that affect the PE portion, so when Windows setup is actually running. Offline servicing is if we're doing anything with the image offline. Generalize is when we're running sysprep and we're getting rid of all the specific system information. Specialize is any custom settings we want to apply to that. And then these two, audit is used when sysprep is running in audit mode. And then you've got this last one with a strange name, OOBE. That stands for out-of-box experience. That's when you run Windows 7 setup for the very first time. After it's done the installation, you get the little wizard that walks you through picking a username, picking the name for your computer, specifying network settings, those types of things. Now, I'm not going to walk through creating an entire unattend file in this module because it's it's quite complicated, and Microsoft provide an awful lot of information around this if it's something that you really want to drill into. In terms of the exam, it's just worth knowing that Windows SIM is the tool you use to create your auto unattend files, and it's worth knowing the basic process. If you're able to go away and do this yourself in a lab, then I recommend that you do, just so that you're a little bit more familiar with it. But we'll run through how you'd set one or two customizations up for your Windows 7 machine, but we're not going to go through everything that you would need. So if we have a look through our components down the left-hand side here, we should see one or two of them that relate to Windows PE. Here we go, International Core WinPE. Now if I highlight that, you can see these are some of the options that we'd be able to choose if we added them into our answer file. To add them in, if I right click, I've then got the option of which section I want to put these in. Now because this relates only to Windows PE, I've only got the option to put them into the Windows PE section. If I do that, I've then got the option of choosing my UI language. So say something like ENUS. And then I can specify my input locale, so that would be the code for my UK keyboard if I wanted to pop that in there. Same for my system locale. And then I can repeat that as well for this. If I right click and choose during my OOBE, I want to set those up. So my system locale again is ENUS. I'd specify my UK keyboard in there. So for the UK, that's actually going to be 0809:00000809. To get that information, you just need to have a look around on the TechNet website. So we'll just set that as well in our Windows PE portion of this. We've also got things in Windows Setup, which should be down here. Now you can see this one we can actually expand. So this is things like our disk configuration. We'd be able to specify that we want to create partitions, what size, what type of partition, what order on the disk they should be, all those sorts of things we can set up in here if we wanted to. One thing I'm going to choose to customize in this is our Internet Explorer settings, just so that we can see after the deployment's gone through that this has in fact worked. So if I add these into our specialized portion, just minimize all that stuff up, have a look down here. We've got a few things such as setting the home page for our users. So if we go in and set our home page to be http bibble-it.com, and we're also going to disable our first run wizard, and we're going to disable out-the-box accelerators. So that's just something that will make life a little bit neater for our users. We want to specify the home page for them and get rid of some of the IE pop-ups that appear the first time you run it. Just one thing to note, setting the home page in this way probably isn't the most sensible thing. It's probably much better to use something like group policy. The only reason I'm doing it here is just to prove the point that this works. Now, on the website where you downloaded this, there should be a link to the TechNet page that has all of these settings. Now, on the website where you downloaded this on the blog posting, there should be a link to the website where all of these settings are listed on Microsoft's TechNet. So I'll just go to that page now and show you some of the other options that you would need if you were creating a full auto unattend file. So this page here, if we have a look down at this, is for a BIOS-based computer. And that's the most common type that you're going to come across. There are other guides for other sorts of computers. If we have a look here, these are some of the sections that Microsoft suggests you add in and what paths you put them in, whether it's Windows PE and Specialize or in OOB. And then down here, these are the actual configuration options against them. These are the minimum that you need to set up to do a full auto unattend installation of Windows. So if we have a look down here, you can see there's quite a lot of them. We're setting up our partitions, creating them, modifying the partition we've just created, saying that we're going to show a UI only if we have come across an error. We're putting our product key in so that we don't have to type it, OEM information, so specifying the company, manufacturer, and then we're going to reboot the machine. I think we've got here, yep, we're going to log in 5 times after we've done our deployment. That's going to give you a chance to install any other applications, etc. you want before you seal the machine up ready for imaging. In our case, we're going to ignore all of that, and we're just going to save our XML file that we've got at the moment. One of the other things that Sim will do for you, if you click up here, you've got a validate answer file option, and you get the results back in the pane at the bottom here. Now you can see we've got quite a lot of warnings here. Most of them are just telling us that we've got things in here that we haven't actually specified. So stuff like our setup neutral, we haven't actually put any of those settings in our config file, so it's just warning us that we've got things added in but nothing set against them. So we're going to save our answer file out, just going to save it onto our desktop, and I'm going to call it auto unattend. That's the name of the file that Windows will look for during setup by default. Last thing I want to do is just copy that onto a removable drive so that I'm able to use it during setup. In my case, I'm going to use a virtual floppy drive just because it's quite hard to attach USB drives onto these virtual machines. And then I'm going to put the same virtual floppy drive into my Windows 7 PC. So this is my Windows 7 reference machine now. Doesn't have anything installed on the hard drive at the moment. Just booting up into Windows PE, and I've got the virtual floppy drive image attached as well. So hopefully we've got setup starting here. The first thing we should see is it'll skip over the language settings because they're actually contained in that unattend file that we set up just before. And there we go, we've gone straight into the select our installation of Windows. We're going to pick Windows 7 Professional, agree to the terms, and off we go. So I'll come back when this is completed, and hopefully we'll be able to open up IE and see all our customizations. Okay, so here we are on the other side of setup. This is our out-of-box experience, as it were. You can see up the top that our keyboard's already set to UK. That's because of the information we supplied in the setup file. We're just going to give this a name. And run through to the end of the wizard. So all of that stuff like product key, time zones, etc., that could have been set up in our file if we'd chosen to, and if you were doing a reference image, more than likely it will have been, because it makes life easier when you're stamping out more and more of these machines. And this is our desktop. If we run IE, you can see there we're going to our custom homepage, and we haven't had any of the pop-ups appear for customizing IE as per the settings. So a quick recap of that last step. Windows sims the tool for creating our unattend XML files. You import your image, then you select the customizations that you need, save it out as an answer file, and if you want to use it during setup, automatically it's auto-unattend.xml. The auto-unattend.xml, make sure it's in the root of a removable drive. That can be a floppy drive or a USB drive. And start Windows setup as normal. Windows will scan for that file. If it finds it, it'll answer all of the questions from that file. And if there's anything that's missing, it'll pop up in the GUI just the same way as it would normally. Next thing we need to do is prepare our reference system for imaging. So you can imagine on our Windows 7 build, if we've gone ahead and installed our custom line of business applications, so you might have wanted to install Office, PowerPoint, Adobe Reader, Flash Player, all those sorts of bits and pieces that are standard across your company's machines. Then we need to prepare our system for imaging. So to do that, you want to delete all unnecessary files and programs. So make sure you haven't got any unnecessary profiles there. Perhaps you had a test user for when you were logging in and out. And then we need to run this tool called sysprep. Sysprep exists in Windows 7 by default. It's in the Windows path system32 and then the sysprep folder. A few switches that you need to know. There's /audit, which lets you test your configuration. So it'll let you reboot the machine and check what it looks like. It reboots that under the local administrator account. When you're in audit mode, you can also add in extra drivers. The main one that you will use is generalize. That resets the SID, system identification number of a machine, resets the event log, and removes most unique information about a computer. That means that when you've deployed the image, Windows will go through and regenerate all of these for each new machine. If you've added any custom out-of-the-box drivers to your installation, it's worth remembering that the /generalize switch on sysprep will get rid of those unless you specified in a config file not to. We've got /OOB, that's our out-of-box experience, so that makes sure that after we've done our sysprep, we'll reboot or shut down, and an xlogon will start our welcome screen. And then we've got two switches for either shutting down or rebooting. Generally, if you're running in audit mode, you just want to reboot because you want to test that out straight away. But if you're running it to prep to take your image, you want to shut the machine down to make sure it doesn't boot up and start going through any of these wizards. So if we switch back to our Windows 7 machine, let's start and run sysprep on it. So the command line is going to be sysprep /generalize, making sure you use the American spelling, /OOBE /reboot. In fact, no, we'll do shutdown. If you're not sure of any of those switches in real life, you would just be able to run sysprep and it'll pop up a little GUI, but for the exam you need to make sure you just know roughly what these switches will be. So you can see here sysprep is just going to run through doing all its varying clean up and tidy up of the machine, and then at the end it's just going to turn the machine off. And that's that machine turned off now. So just a quick recap with what we've gone through. We've done our unattend, we've created our reference computer, we've generalized that, and next we're going to look at creating our WinPE boot disk. Now this next step might be a little tricky to follow, but don't worry about it too much as long as you've got the general idea and know what the names of the tools are that we're using. So to create our Windows PE media, we're going to use a batch file that's part of the WARK called copype.cmd. You run that with two arguments. One's the type of PE image that you want to create, either AMD64, Itanium64 or x86. Generally the two you would be using are either AMD64 or x86, and then the destination where you want it to output the folder to. That command is found in the wik install path /tools/pe tools. What that does is it creates the folder structure on disk for us. If we want to go ahead and turn that into an image, a bootable CD, we also need to make sure we copy winpe.wim from the root of this folder that will be created into /iso/sources and rename it to boot.wim. I'll show that as an example in just a second. We also need to make sure to include the ImageX tool in this folder path. That's because it isn't included by default, but it's going to be ImageX that will actually capture our image for us. It's worth noting that ImageX can have its own configuration file called wimscript.ini. You'd use that for specifying any exclusions that ImageX is to ignore any directories or folders on your local computer. You can't add any switches to have a path for wimscript.ini. It has to always just be in the same directory where you're running ImageX from. And lastly, we're going to use this tool OSCD image, and we're going to run that with a few switches to actually create an ISO out of this folder structure that's been created for us. -N and then -B, and then it's just to remember that there's this file etfsboot.com that's supplied again for us, and then we just give it the path to the ISO directory and a destination on disk. So that sounds a little bit complicated, so let's actually have a look at that. So if we go into our deployment tools command prompt, and then we want to run our copy PE, we're going to do x86, and we're just going to copy that to c/winpe. You can see it's copied 6 files for us there, and if we go and have a look under my computer, we'll have a look at the structure of that. So in this winpe, we've got our etfs boot, so that's our boot sector that's going to be used as part of the CD. We've got our actual winpe wim file, this is the meat of winpe, and inside here our ISO directory. We've got any files and anything extra that we want to include on the CD, we put in here. So what we're going to do is copy our winpe.wim into here and then sources, and we're going to rename that to be boot.wim. Next thing we want to do is remember to copy in our ImageX. So to do that, we browse to the wik installation path, into tools, and then pick your architecture. So again, x86 for us. We're going to copy ImageX and paste it into the root of our CD. We're not going to bother running it with a configuration file, only really need to do that if there's some specific need. Last thing we want to do then is actually generate our ISO file. So if we go back into our wik tools directory, and we'll just go down a level into the x86 directory, and then run our OSCD image tool. Now remember, it's with -N, -B, and then no spaces, the path to our etfs boot, so that's c:/winpe/etfsboot.com. Then we're going to give it the path winpe/ISO to our files that we want turned into the ISO, and our destination is going to be c/winpe/winpe x86.iso. Can see it's running through there, just creating our ISO file, and completed successfully. So if we have a look in our winpe folder, we've got our ISO file there now, about 140 meg, something like that. If you end up with it at about 27 meg, chances are you've forgotten to copy your winpe.wim file into that ISO sources directory. So I've copied that ISO file onto my server, and I've set it up so that this Windows 7 machine is now going to boot from the CD. And you can see it just looks like it's starting a normal session of Windows PE there. And we've booted up. We're just going to have a command window here. There's no sort of a GUI to this Windows PE. So if you have a look, we can see we're running an X. That's because we're actually running the system in a RAM drive. If we go to the root of that drive and do a dir, you'll see we've got our users directory, Windows, etc. If we have a look somewhere like F, it might well be, maybe E, and have a look, that's our CD that's in the drive with our ImageX. If we have a look at the C drive, we can see that that's blank. That's most likely going to be the hidden partition that Windows 7 creates. You remember in the first module we discussed how it creates itself a 100 meg hidden partition. That's what this is, and that then means that D is most likely to be our standard Windows 7 installation that we want to create our image from. So now we need to capture our image, and I'm going to do that to a network location. So I'm just going to do net use, then a drive letter, and then the name of our server, and then the share that I've created on that. Just going to pop in some username and credentials, and that should now have mapped us a drive to a network location. Great. So if we go back to our CD, and let's have a look at what command we're going to run to actually capture our image. So boot from the CD, we've done that. Then we're going to run this ImageX tool. We're going to run it with a few switches, the main one being /capture, and then we're going to specify our source drive. So in our case, that's going to be the D drive, remember, because our C drive is empty. And then give it a destination drive letter, in our case N, for our network location. Then we need to provide it with a name parameter. That's so that we know which image we're dealing with, because we can have multiple images inside our WIM. Then we've got a compression options. We can go for maximum, fast, or none. And then the option to verify. It's worth noting that because I'm doing this across a network, even if I don't specify it, the /verify option will be turned on by default. So let's see what that looks like. So let's actually run those commands and capture our image file. So that's ImageX /capture, and then D drive, give it a location, so N/image, in fact win7 image.wim, give it a description, compression, we'll just leave as fast, and we're good to go. So you can see there's a few things that have happened here by default. These are the things that are going to be excluded, so hibernation file, page file, recycle bin, and it's automatically turned on the verify option for us because we're doing this copy across the network. You can see now it's been running for a little bit of time that we've got some sort of a status report here, so I'm just going to leave it until the end now. Okay, and that's eventually finished there. You can see it took about 20 minutes or so. If we have a look on our server, we should have in our images directory that we shared out, that's our WIM file there, win7 image.wim. We would be able to, using ImageX from another machine, we'd be able to capture a second image without having to create another WIM file if we wanted to. Okay, so let's move on. Enterprise deployments, the stuff we've covered just there, are great if you're deploying handfuls of computers, but not if you've got lots and lots of machines going on. That's why Microsoft also makes some other tools available. We've got MDT, which is the Microsoft Deployment Toolkit. That works by allowing you to create task sequences. So you can create packages of drivers, so you can also do things like specifying that you're going to install this such and such an image, apply these settings, then apply this bunch of drivers, then reboot the machine, then take an automatic capture of that machine, those sorts of things. There's also a whole lot of resources available around MDT. One of the main methods that MDT lets you do is called a light touch deployment. Light touch means it needs very little input from the system admin to make it work. It is possible to do zero touch deployment, which means that everything is fully automated, but that's only when MDT is integrated with System Center Configuration Manager. I do suggest you go and have a look at Microsoft's websites. Again, see the blog posting for some links. Go and have a read about it just so you're aware about what it can do. MDT is also free, by the way. WDS, Windows Deployment Services, is a role that's included in Server 2008. It allows you to do PXE booting over the network. That'll integrate in with Active Directory so that a user authenticates themselves. They then get a list of what images they're allowed to apply to their machine. So it takes out the manual process in this, where we had to boot up off our PE media, then run ImageX to capture our image, or in following modules you'll see how we use ImageX to actually deploy images back. WDS allows you to automate some of those procedures. So a quick summary then of the key things that you need to remember. WAIK, Windows Automated Install Kit. That's a collection of tools that help with capturing system images. Windows SIM, System Image Manager, is the tool that lets you create custom unattend.xml files. OS CD Image is a tool that lets you create a CD from your Windows PE installation. ImageX is a tool that lets you capture your image out to a WIM file. You use the command /capture to do that. WimScript.ini is the file that lets you customize how ImageX works, as in what files, what folders it includes or excludes. That's WimScriptFile.ini. You have to make sure that that's in the same path as your ImageX, in the same location. You can't specify it using a command switch. And we've also talked about Windows PE, so we've shown using a batch file how you can copy a WinPE depending on what architecture you need to run it on, and then you need to remember that you copy your winpe.wim into iso/sources and rename it as boot.wim. Then the other tool we've discussed is sysprep. Sysprep is included with Windows 7. The two main switches you need to know about, /generalize, spelled the American way with a Z, and /audit. Generalize strips out all the custom identifying information about your computer, and /audit lets you test that your sysprep is working. So thank you very much. Hope you've enjoyed that. Please make sure to just leave me some feedback, and hope to see you again soon.